Insurance isn't our only passion at UFG Insurance. We're dedicated to supporting the communities where we live and work. We proudly offer our employees paid time off to volunteer. Their work is making a positive difference across the U.S. UFG's Go Beyond Award is presented to one employee annually for exceptional community service. Striving to deliver on our promises is more than what we do. It's who we are. For a company promising community support, think UFG.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to Iowa Ideas 2024. The whole conference is sponsored by ITC Midwest, so thank you to them. My name is Megan Woolard. I'm the Johnson County reporter for the Gazette, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. This is the Collaborative Economic Development session, so if that is not where you want to be, this is your time to figure that out. Our session today is sponsored by the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance and UFG Insurance, so thank you all to them. And I was hoping we could just start by having our panelists introduce themselves. So let's start with Stephen, then we'll go to Jill, and then end with Nancy.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks to the Gazette for this opportunity. My name is Stephen Van Steenhouse. I'm the Director of Development Services for the City of Mason City in North Central Iowa. I am a Cedar Rapids native, a graduate, both undergraduate and master's of the University of Iowa. Been with the City of Mason City for 12 years, but I've been a planner for about 35 years. And that's what I do, mostly city planning, and also help coordinate with various agencies the economic development efforts of the City of Mason City.
Great. My name is Jill Wilkins. I'm the Executive Director for the New Bohemian Innovation Collaborative, or NewBoCo for short. We are a nonprofit located in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. However, our events and services are throughout the state of Iowa. So we have the opportunity to work with many communities and partners throughout the state. I started with the organization in 2016. And prior to that, I was a staff member of the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance, one of our sponsors for this session, and then the Downtown District prior to that in Cedar Rapids.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nancy Bird. I'm the president at Greater Iowa City, Inc., which is a new organization that last year merged the Chamber, the Business Partnership, and the Iowa City Area Development Group into a new organization that services all of Johnson County. We're a public-private organization that really serves the business community. We work on strategic initiatives and are really here to convene and advocate for economic resiliency across the county. We have a really wonderful stakeholder group that includes a lot of our public sector partners, the municipalities, University of Iowa, Johnson County, as well as our large industry leaders and smaller companies across the county. So we're just getting started in this new role. And some of my background that I bring to the organization is I worked for the past 10 years for the Iowa City Downtown District, and previous to that, I kind of grew my career out in the Seattle area, working in planning and economic development on regional plans, as well as local as an urban planner, servicing the city of Seattle. So I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you to the Gazette for having us, and I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. I'll just start off with all of your roles. Kind of you all wear a lot of hats. How does, specifically collaborative economic development kind of play out in each of your roles?
Well, I guess I can start with that. Unlike my fellow panelists, I am government, and so that makes things a little interesting. But it's important to remember that government, when it comes to economic development, when it comes to economic development issue or things that are issues that are related to economic development, such as workforce housing, daycare, all of the kinds of things that we deal with. It's important to remember the government can't do it alone. We really rely on our partnerships with other organizations. For instance, here in Mason City, we work closely with the North Iowa Corridor Economic Development Corporation, which represents Mason City, the city of Clear Lake, and Cerro Gordo County. We work closely with the city Mason City Chamber, with Visit Mason City, with Main Street Mason City. So there are many organizations that we have to work collaboratively with if we're going to move our economic development efforts in our region forward.
I can chime in next. So our nonprofit Nubo Co. Focuses on entrepreneurship support and computer science education. And so I like to think of us as, we're one piece of that economic development puzzle. And because of that, we work very closely with the other partners within our Cedar Rapids community, the corridor. Nancy's a great example of an organization that we work with very often, and then within the other communities that we serve. And so that ranges from, again, as Steve was saying, city government to the chambers of commerce to other business entities to school districts throughout the state. And, it's really important for us to be able to have those partnerships to really understand where can we best support efforts, where can we help fill gaps within other areas with our programming to make sure that we are boosting that effort of economic development, providing services that aren't already maybe available in a community. And so that collaborative effort to really be able to identify where we best can tap in is essential for the work we do.
I would just add real quickly, as far as collaboration goes, economic development is such a huge kind of field. And really a lot of it is, it's working towards growing the economy, identifying needs, working on solutions. And it's really kind of the table stakes of how it gets done. There's very few, if I can't think of one thing that we work on, or even a municipality or other government agency that can work on by themselves. It's the nature of the work to be collaborative. It's just that some people do it better than others. And when you go in with the mindset of starting to understand what stakeholders are important for the work that you're doing, it's just a better mindset, I think. So that's not always the way people kind of start projects, but I think it's very, very important. So collaboration is the game. So
Kind of going off of that, what does it take to have a successful collaboration between entities?
I'll start. Part of this is because I've been thinking a lot about it with our new organization. And I don't know, we're a year and a few months old, so maybe I'll stop saying new, but it feels still pretty new. But I think in order to collaborate well, you sort of have to know what your goals are. And we've been working on that in our area to really understand kind of what the efforts are that our organization can help support. And so understanding who are your important stakeholders, why they matter to you. And I do think, understanding your climate is really important. A lot of times not doing careful research or study or evaluation of what else is out there can lead you to start collaborating in the wrong direction. So I think a good study of understanding, where you're at, what your baseline is pretty critical to moving any good project forward.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with everything what Nancy said. And I think, that intentionality, with the collaboration coming through and having that common goal, and then just being intentional about the process and how those different stakeholders, why they're there, why that serves as a value, so that really helps us, just solidify everyone's, focus, so that there can be really intentional work that's done.
Yeah, and I'll echo all of that. I'd start by saying I'm really jealous of what Nancy has in Johnson County. That's right now in Mason City, we still have all of these different organizations that have their silos or their various areas that they focus on, and it would be great to have an overarching organization that the typical site selector or company looking for a new site can deal with, rather than who do I call? Do I call the EDC? Do I call the city? Who do we work with? Fortunately, we do have the people that are involved with those various organizations are committed to working together. And so in a sense, we have a coalition. It's just not a formal one, and I wish we did. But since we're seem to be making progress with what we have, it'll probably stay this way for a while. But again, it all comes down to the individuals and the entities that are involved. Are you committed to making positive changes, positive action within your community, or is it about strengthening your own organization, or trying to raise the visibility of your organization so that if there's a success, you're the ones taking credit for it? Thankfully, we don't really have a lot of that, so we're going to survive. But that can be an issue, and so if there are multiple organizations involved, it's just really important that that they have the same commitment towards working together.
How do, relationships between entities, how do these get started and, maintained over the course of, a single project or years even?
One of the things, Steve, it kind of reminds me, a lot of times, or what we've found is that, these smaller economic development groups or any nonprofit or entity that gets started typically was started to solve a problem that's and they stick around. So either the problem sticks around or the goal or their mission still continues to be important. Sometimes, things shift and change. I mean, post-COVID, a lot of things have really changed. So goals have changed, opportunities have changed. And I think where one of the things that we've been trying to think about is, are we still working in a climate that is supportive of all the entities we have? Or is it something where we should be partnering with another group? They oftentimes come with a nonprofit status. There's a whole back end that requires attention that itself is work. So in any climate, I would say the people who step up to really support critical projects that do it because they are doing it without the ego and they just know it's an important thing to do. The communities that have that figured out, who are your good partners that really understand the work? Sometimes it doesn't matter what the entity is, as long as they're willing to step up in it. But then there's also the opportunity to evolve or change and think about how you can do more with less, because nonprofits take care. They take a lot of attention to make sure that they stay together, and not everything needs to be a nonprofit. Sometimes it's just a group that comes together to collaborate that doesn't ever really need to formalize. So thinking through those things, I think a lot of times when there's a new entity that starts to open up or want to work on a project, they're like, oh, well, we should be a nonprofit. Not always, a lot of our communities have really wonderful community foundations that can support that so that you can work through to solve for a solution, but not actually have to formalize everything so specifically. It allows for a little bit more of a nimbleness to work through things, but not necessarily maintain it forever. So it's an interesting field. I know that when I first started, we counted there were 9 different economic development agencies in Johnson County alone. So the people who are trying to work with all of them they're rightfully a little confused. So it doesn't matter so much who, what entity you're working with, so long as those companies or those the solutions on the ground are getting resolved. But if they're not, because of the nature of how many people or entities are involved, then that's where I think that there's opportunity for change.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking about how we've been connected to some of our partners and have started some of the new collaborations. I think a lot of it has been through current partners and just listening and being open to new introductions as well. We've had a couple really exciting new groups to be able to work with, new individuals that we've started some collaborations within the last year or so, as far as figuring out ways that we can be working together more, thinking about the different areas that we are serving and the goals that we are reaching. And some of those were through introductions from people who've been working with over the years previously. And so I think that ability to really leverage current partners to be able to continue to expand your bubble and your resources, because there's a lot of great entities out there. There are many entities out there, individuals working in some of these spaces, and to be able to bring new thoughts to those different conversations, I think really opens up some additional doors and unique opportunities. And so that has been something that I've really appreciated, is that I think those that we work with have been really generous in opening up their networks to us to be able to then help us expand our work.
Yeah, I think of an example. I think a lot of times that collaboration grows out of issues that may not have been in the forefront when the organization started, but become more apparent as time goes on. The example I think of here in North Iowa is the housing issue. It was not a big issue until maybe 10 years ago or so, as we started to see some expanding businesses here, and also the primacy of our medical center here that became our largest employer, trying to find quality housing for those people. And that sort of ticked off the idea of how are we going to find opportunities for more affordable housing, for workforce housing. And so what's grown out of that with the organizations that we have is that we created a housing development corporation that is an arm of the Economic Development Corporation. And as that helps with funding because that organization gets a lot of funds. And also timing was good because we used a lot of our ARPA funding to get this Housing Development Corporation off the ground. But again, it was the people who were already involved in the issue in the various organizations got together and said, we need to expand our reach and find a way to deal with this issue. And so now we've got another organization that we're working with that is helping us meet that goal.
So each of you are based in, different geographic areas. Can you kind of each talk about what it's like working with communities of different sizes and, different priorities and how you manage that?
We have we in Johnson County, we have 3 larger municipalities, but then other municipalities as well, and then smaller communities, and then our county land. And I would say that each one of these organizations, when it comes to our relationship with them, is kind of meeting them with the needs that wherever they're at. So if they're a community that is really kind of dialed in with their stakeholders, we're trying to add value in the places where they might need it in smaller ways, and in some it's in bigger ways. But I think that comes with really specific conversations with the leadership in those communities to understand what the value is and not try to overwhelm or provide too much. Because I think the relationships are really important. Like, how can you be helpful right out of the bat with something small matters a lot. And then you can grow that relationship over time. But each community has their own needs and their own leadership within it. Sometimes you'll have one that is really focused in on economic development. Other times they're not. So, we just try to be good listeners and support where we know that those communities are working on things.
I think in our experience, it's definitely been very important for us to be invited by the community to be a part of the conversation. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we're wanting to make sure that the work that we're doing is complementing other work that's already being done in the community and filling a gap that maybe is not otherwise there. And so just being really mindful that for that to be successful, that those in the community already need to be on the same page and wanting that additional support for that success to be there. Realizing that as we all know, every community is very different within size and scope, but even small communities are all unique and large communities are all unique. So there is no one size fit all approach, but being able to be a part of that initial conversation, to be able to help ask questions from maybe a different point of view, not necessarily being actively involved, has been something that I think has been helpful in our role to be able to kind of have that a different perspective and to be able to ask those questions, to be able to help community members figure out where we can best tap in. And then again, just kind of to what Nancy's point is, just seeing, the different partners that can be there. Again, those community members know what's best, but it's also exciting to be able to challenge that a little bit so that it isn't necessarily maybe the same organizations, because there could be some really interesting input from some others that haven't necessarily been a part of that economic development process before, but actually really are adding to that community and adding value and adding just again, uniqueness to that space.
Yeah, here in North Iowa, we're not an urban area. Mason City is about 28,000 people. 8 miles to the west of us is Clear Lake with about 8,000 people. And the total county population is about 45,000 people. So we don't have some of the issues that you might find in the Des Moines metro or, in some of the larger urban counties where, a lot of the cities, especially the suburbs, are locked in annexation wars with each other and trying to expand. That even though that's not the case here in Cerro Gordo County, there had been over the years a bit of competition or mistrust between the cities of Mason City and Clear Lake. As we expanded towards them to the west and they were expanding towards us to the east, it was like, what happens to that basically mile and a half that separates our city limits, who's going to get what. And for many years, there was, I think, an antagonistic relationship between the two communities. Luckily, over time, as city councils change and city administrators and staffs change, and as people start to see that, what happens in Clear Lake affects Mason City and vice versa. In 2011, we combined our economic development corporations into one. And that was kind of the beginning, I think, of a much more collaborative experience. Just last year, the cities of Mason City and Clear Lake and Cerro Gordo County completed a joint comprehensive plan, which to my knowledge, never in Iowa history have 3 government entities worked together on a comprehensive plan. So, we're pretty proud of that. We're proud that now that, we are working together and it's been to everybody's benefit. So, sometimes you have to deal with old animosities, but thankfully that's not an issue anymore and hopefully won't ever be again in the future.
So once we kind of have relationships established between entities, how can we ensure that everyone is kind of still working towards, the same goal and shared vision?
Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of communication and consistent communication is a big part of that. It takes a lot of work, right? To be able to continue to have everyone working on that same path, because it's very easy to just get it back into our own day-to-day work and to not necessarily always look up at the larger vision that's maybe more down the road a little bit, that we are taking those small steps toward. But I think, as we've started some new focus on some collaborations here in Cedar Rapids in particular, I think about just finding those consistent touch points to make sure that we really do have that close communication with those other partners that are part of this goal that we're working towards, that we're staying in tune with what their challenges are, what their opportunities that they're seeing, and being able to continue to leverage that and to really build and foster those good relationships. But there is definitely that time and component and that effort, to just make sure that continues.
Jill's 100% right on the communication side. It's just got to be all the time so people stay informed, because as soon as you leave the room to go off to do the work, it's just hard when others are in their own, kind of siloed work. They just don't know, right? So you got to constantly share it. The other thing that I would add to that is the idea of making sure that whatever you are working on is kind of like a win-win-win approach, where it's important for you to do it, it's important for them to do it, and you're both getting something out of it at some point, and that you both really understand that. Because I think, as this, for me, like the sustainability in the work is really something I like to think about, because over the course of time, things change. So if you're not really tapped in on how things change, it may no longer be a win-win, for both partners. So being really mindful and deliberate about what you're working on, the communication back to them, and just sharing, making sure that we're all sharing those points of what's working and what isn't, so that we stay together on the primary goal. And every program or project has a different kind of win-win. And like one of the things that we're working on right now, as we talk to the different municipalities in our area, as well as, the business community, everybody has information, but we're not all sharing it or using it in a way that allows us to work together. So we're working on a data project right now, and Evan Doyle, I know he's out there. Shout out to Evan. He's doing some great work for us. But, in that exercise, data, seems like it's really important, and it is. You have to keep it fresh and making sure that it's constantly focused on the needs of the day. So even if we work on something and get a really nice streamline and the next 3 to 4 years on information, that data need could shift. So we have to check in with our stakeholders, make sure it stays relevant, that it stays fresh. And then we're still delivering that, because once you kind of get set and locked in on how you're going to run the project, you have to constantly reevaluate. So the win-win, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I can't really add much to all of that. I mean, the communication is key. Everybody needs to understand where we're at with the various steps that are involved in a project, and to make sure that everybody's on board and just keep things moving. And when that collaboration, that communication is there, then you get the win-win that Nancy's talking about.
Perfect. Would you each mind, talking a bit more in depth about like a specific project that you've worked on in your role that, has worked well in terms of collaboration?
Well, I'll start with that one. Right here, let's see, over my shoulder here, in my background, is part of what was originally the downtown mall in Mason City, Southbridge Mall. Like most malls in small cities and large cities as well, when the anchor stores died, then the mall kind of shriveled. And so there was a lot of concern here because, the mall was basically an urban renewal project back in the 1970s and 80s. And it was actually quite successful for a long time, but, it was starting to fail. And we didn't want to see, what's happened to so many small cities of our size where the mall died. And now you've got this big empty building that nobody wants to do anything with. So working with several local nonprofits and our local financing, our banks and various lenders, we were able to secure funds to take what was the JCPenney store in the mall, lowered the floor, raised the ceiling. Now it is a 2,000-seat hockey arena that we have hockey in. We have a couple of semi-pro teams that play here. We have concerts and events in the summer. So that took a lot of collaboration between the city, between the Youth Hockey Association, who was raising the funds, through all the various lenders in the state of Iowa to make that happen. And I think one of the things we sometimes forget about in economic development is the importance of placemaking. It's not just drawing businesses to your community, but it's then making it an attractive community where people want to live, they want to start families or raise families that they want to spend their lives in. And offering those kinds of amenities is really important, and that's what employers are certainly looking for. So we put a lot of effort into like this arena, and now we've just in front of the mall along Willow Creek, which is, the creek goes through the downtown. We ignored it for decades. Now we're building a river walk, we call it. It's not really a river, but it's going to be a great amenity for our downtown, and it'll draw people downtown. We've really focused on building trails. We're building what we think will be the premier mountain bike park of the Midwest. If you're familiar with Bentonville, Arkansas, they have a mountain bike park that's world renowned, and the same designers are building ours. So we're going to become, the upper Midwest location for mountain biking. So just those kinds of placemaking things that we're doing, and those are things that do help with our economic development efforts and just make you feel good, because it's a lot of fun to be a part of, especially when it's done.
Mm-hmm. I can talk about a recent project we worked on over the summer. And I think for me, this one was exciting because we were a piece of the conversation and helped facilitate the start of a conversation that was not necessarily overarching an area that's maybe our area of expertise, but we saw an opportunity to be able to help pull in a variety of experts in a different area and to be able to help start that conversation. And so this was in relation to a large federal grant opportunity that if it were to come through would have some amazing economic development impacts in our area. But again, it was a very innovative opportunity, which really is in our wheelhouse, and a piece of that, really thinking about building business through entrepreneurship and the tech side of things. But from the industry sector, there was more to it than would necessarily be where we would just, have that sweet spot. So we were able to pull in a variety of public and private partners from various organizations to really be able to put our heads together and say, what cool thing could we create if the resources were available? How could we really build and elevate the business that is already here in this industry if we had additional resources? And it was really exciting to be able to find members of all of those, of the city, of the different companies that were willing to take part in that conversation on the front end. And I think that who knows may come of that effort, but we have this cool plan now. We have this really neat plan, and also gives us the ability to now be more proactive in the future and less reactive. And so I think that is something that I am excited about as we start to think about collaborations and being intentional with that, is the ability to already have that structure in place, those partnerships in place, so that when opportunities present themselves either within individual communities or the state as a whole, we're able to go after them and already have those pieces to an extent in place and to not miss opportunities.
I'll share a project we've been working on over the past year, and it kind of builds on the idea of a good plan. We've been working with our local jurisdictions on trying to identify within the county strategic investment districts whereby we can help kind of shine a light on a location that we believe has an asset base within a neighborhood that, with additional private sector support and public sector care, we can help really revitalize or bring additional resources to emerging neighborhoods. And because we know that people they typically really love their neighborhood, or they're really attached to a neighborhood, even more so than a jurisdiction or an area, people love their neighborhoods, that we feel like that's an essential building block to creating a great place. We just need more wonderful neighborhoods. So we've been working on opportunities with our public sector partners to identify and start with locations that need additional resourcing and support from the private sector. And oftentimes, the private sector, as I'm sharing this, is like, there's lots of different landowners, there's lots of different developers, there's lots of different businesses, but a lot of them live here in the community and they care about these places. And with additional opportunity, they might just jump in, and invest more in a certain location. So we've been working with our local architectural community, really, who have volunteered a lot of their services to say, hey, we see opportunities in this area, to identify those. And we hope to unveil them later on in the year as places where, as both municipal governments and our team is working on identifying how we can all work together to build these emerging places. So it's been really rewarding so far. We have a lot of interest, and people are really interested in seeing how they can basically contribute something to a certain area of the community that needs the support. So a lot of collaborative work there, and probably long term, it'll take years and years. But I think with a lot of these projects and programs in economic development, it starts with having those good relationships and a need and understanding what you can do together, and then sustaining those over time as things change and evolve. So it's an exciting time. And I think that we've got, having some of those fundamentals in place, it feels like there's a lot we can do. So.
Very exciting stuff. A couple of you mentioned making sure you're addressing the needs of the community you're working with, or even being like invited into the community you're working with? How do you go about balancing what the community, because sometimes communities don't want a ton of new economic development. They're kind of like, this is what we have, this is how it is. And a lot of people are like, we do want more businesses coming in. How do you kind of balance all of the needs of stakeholders, the public and private sector, and residents themselves?
I would say, just starting out, first of all, it can be challenging, but then also education is really helpful. I think the more people understand some of the complex challenges of the day, the more reasonable people seem to be. So really starting with the baseline of education and relationships, I think, is really important to getting things moving in the right direction. And when there are stakeholder groups that are opposed, to make sure that the team that's working with them really understands it, what their challenges are to get to that win-win. I think, with every project or program, understanding a good stakeholder engagement plan is important. So I'll say that. But I do think education is a really important piece of it from trusted sources. And we hope to be that trusted source and that we're going to provide reliable information to the best of our ability.
I would again agree with a lot of what Nancy's saying, and I think that that opportunity to make sure that everyone is heard, and those difference of opinions are given the opportunity to be stated, so that understanding is there, to be able to then even just look at prioritization. Maybe a variety of those difference of opinions are maybe just more along of what and when, not necessarily the end goal. And so being able to have that be a part of the conversation very early on, and the understanding and, to Nancy's point, education of maybe why something is going to be acted on first versus later, to make sure that whether they agree or not, that there is, again, that same page that everybody is on.
Well, my perspective, of course, comes from the fact that I work for a local government. And policy is set by our city council, our elected city council, and relayed through the city administration, through to the staff. And there have been things that I've had to work on, or I've had to advocate for, that I personally or professionally might not even agree with. But part of my job is to reflect the policies through the duly elected city council, and so that's what we do. We are required statutorily to, hold public hearings and do legal notices and things like that. So we do work hard to try to get everyone's input, but it's an inefficient process, and we know that we don't reach a lot of people. Generally, the only people we hear from are the people who are aggrieved in some way. If we're looking at rezoning a property to accommodate a industrial expansion, for instance, 90% of the electorate don't care. That last 10% might, they care because they are going to be affected in some way. There's going to be more traffic, or they're going to have development in their backyard where they've had farm fields, for the last 20 years. Those sorts of things that we deal with. And how do you overcome those? You do have to make sure that you make an effort to get everybody's opinions heard, and sometimes we have to kind of look outside the box to find that. In these days of social media, you can certainly take advantage of that. There's a Facebook page called North Iowa Rant and Rave, and we probably get more input from that, although there's more rants than there are raves. So, it's hard to get a good sense of what people really want. But I think that if the intention is for being future focused, looking at what's going to be best for the community in the long run, and not just for how it's going to affect maybe one or two people in the short run, we can find that common ground and make it work.
One thing I would add is, I think all of us, if you're a practitioner in this room, have seen projects go bad or go the wrong direction. And, for whatever learning can come off that, if it was, an issue with stakeholder base not supporting it or not enough information going out, sometimes you can reboot the same project with a change in leadership, a change in timing. It may have been just the process wasn't right. It doesn't necessarily means that the solution couldn't have worked. So I've seen, and I'm sure many of you have seen, things kind of recirculate and move forward successfully, where in the past they may not have worked. I mean, I can tell you from our own work that we're doing this year, a merger like this would never have happened probably before COVID. And all of a sudden the need had changed, right? And so the timing had changed. Some of the same leadership is still here. So that's, I think that it's helpful to revisit every project and plan to understand like how things can evolve and whether or not sometimes the timing just isn't right. You set it aside and one day it might be right again and you give it a shot. So I think of that with the city councils, you see things kind of move through and then, 2 years later they actually pass. So, things change in the environment all the time.
So kind of going from there, where would each of you kind of like to see, collaborative economic efforts go in your respective communities, like from here?
I'm excited.
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say, I'm just excited to see it continue kind of on a path that it's going right now with some real intentional heightened collaboration in some areas and really understanding and identifying that we all have roles to play and to just really be working together on identifying if there are areas where we can expand in some of the services we're providing, understand that maybe we don't need to be doing something anymore because somebody else, as referencing that, things change and the environment changes. There's some new partners out there that weren't there when our organization first started, for example. And so being able to see where that future lies with those of us all working in the different space and being able to really work together toward that shared vision. And I think being able to see that on a community level, working well and working towards making that better, the opportunity for that to then work on a more regional and a fully statewide basis to, again, kind of go back to that point of being really proactive and thinking ahead about how we can be working together through that economic development in collaboration to be able to kind of go after some of the big opportunities that may come our way and to be ready for them. And so I think there's a lot of great things out there that we're able to just really focus on continuing and heightening. Sorry, Steve, I'll pass it to you.
No, okay, thanks. I see great things for the future and for the state. I'm gratified to, be part of this with, Jill from, my hometown and Nancy from my college town, two of the best places in the world, in my opinion. Just to see what's going on in Iowa. I mean, the Des Moines Metro is a fantastic place. They're doing fantastic things. Next week, I'm going to be in Sioux City for a conference, and I know that they've done some really inventive things with their resources. It's great to be a part of all of that, and I just think that things are just going to continue to get better. As Nancy said, COVID caused a lot of rethinking of how we do things, and I think that our focus now on placemaking, on quality of life and things like that has really made a big difference in how we look at what we do and how to do it right.
Yeah, I don't know that I have much more to add than that, except for it's been a number of years where, collaboration is the new competition. And I think people, having experienced a lot of collaborative projects over the course of time, are recognizing that the opportunity to leverage someone else's kind of base when you're partnering like that is probably more impactful than direct competition when it comes to things working. So I think that dialing in on what our collaborations look like and having really honest conversations, I think, I don't know if this is because we're Iowans or the Iowa Nice thing is out there, but I think it's really, really important that we can share information in a caring way with our partners so that they understand what the motivations are, so that you can move through some of the challenging issues that are out there. I think that is a really helpful strategy so that we're not just all kind of repeating ourselves or doing things that aren't working. And I think the environment that I've noticed over the past 10 years being in the Iowa City area, that things have really improved on that front. And my hope is that we can kind of even move this into more of the political realm where we're used to a dialogue that is less polarizing, because I think, 95% of our state really wants to do some wonderful things. And you see these polarizing elements really taking us off course. So I think there's great opportunity to do some impactful work across the state. And I'm glad to have all these partners here in the room to be working with.
So as we sort of begin to wrap up here, I just kind of want to know, what do you guys think makes an effort truly collaborative?
Well, again, I think it starts with, the attitude of the partners involved, and you have to commit to collaboration. It can't be just something you do because the circumstances demand it, although that does happen. But you have to be committed to it. You have to be willing to, look outside of your silo to make things happen. And be willing to share, both the benefits and the difficulties that go along with the collaborative effort in that particular project. So if you can't do that, it's not going to work. And so, again, I mean, even though we don't have an organizational structure that really makes it the way it could be, still here in Mason City, we've got, great partners that are committed to each other and committed to the community. And so we can make it work. If any one of them decided that, their ego or whatever, made it important that they get the credit or that they be the lead or whatever it is, things would just fall apart. So hopefully that'll never happen. And again, maybe someday we'll have that kind of overarching organization that puts everybody together and gives us a more central focus for developers to work with.
I might just add that I think it is just agreeing to move along a path together toward a shared vision, realizing that we all may have more of a role along the journey at different times, or we'll take maybe more of a leadership role or more of a supporting role at different times along that longer work together, but committing to working together towards that shared vision, I think, and knowing those roles that we all play and why it's important. And then to what Nancy had said, that win-win part, that realizing that a win for one piece along the way is a win for everyone and a win for that ultimate goal, because it's getting us one step closer.
I would add spot on with the commitment. People need to be committed to doing it. So if they're not, that's always erodes the progress, but also trust. I think, where you are starting from a good relationship base, it's helpful, but you can build trust over time. And when you trust your partners are committed, it makes a huge difference. I think one of the biggest challenges in this work, and I think about it every day, is like the ego side of it. Like how can we reduce that piece of it, or even the protecting the organization, like just have to trust the fact that those relationships are strong enough that they can carry you through. Because everybody has stakeholders that they have to make sure that they see that they're accountable to. And yet that shouldn't get in the way of getting really good work done. So when people come to the table and they're committed and you trust that they're going to be there for you, it's a great way to start a collaboration.
All right, we are getting close to time. So do you guys have any last words or any things you want to make sure the audience takes away from this session?
Well, I just want to invite people to come to North Iowa, come see Mason City. I'm Mason City's #1 booster. We have the only remaining hotel designed by Frank Lloyd Wright here in Mason City, and we are an architectural destination. 2 buildings designed by Frank Lloyd Wright and several other prairie-style homes. Clear Lake, beautiful place, home of the Surf Ballroom, which was where Buddy Holly had his last concert before he was killed in the day the music died. There's just so much in outside of the metro areas in Iowa to see and do. And so come and see us.
I'm coming, Steve. I'm coming.
All
That
right.
sounds awesome.
Look me up when you get here.
I think the main thing on my end is that I think we are in a great spot to be able to really just embrace the collaboration and go with it. I think I've been very excited to be a part of many really exciting projects throughout the course of my career, and those all have been because of great organizations and people working together. And I also think the ability to just be able to reach out and have somebody respond. And so to just embrace the fact that I think in the state of Iowa, we have great access to various entities that will have a conversation. I always think back that, Director Durham is such a wonderful resource and that we can throw out an idea, and she listens and takes that to heart, and that ability to be able to reach out to somebody at the state level is great. And so I think we have that all within our different communities. And so I just encourage everybody to take advantage of that.
I'm just appreciative of everybody joining the session today, and hopefully everybody's getting involved in all these organizations. And if you have questions also, I always feel like if people aren't asking the questions, then there's always somebody else that has the same one. So to continue to step up and help support through making sure that all of these organizations have the information they need to do good work.
Perfect. Well, thank you to all of you panelists for taking your time today to come and, speak with all of us. Thanks to the audience for tuning in. Also have to thank all the sponsors again for, the conference, ITC Midwest, and then our session specifically, the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance and, UFG Insurance. Iowa Ideas 2024 is almost over. We do have one more keynote session at 1, so tune into that if that's something you're interested in. And thanks again to our panelists and everybody for making the time to come and join us.